Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Major League Balatro recap. I'm your host, Phantom, and joining me today is Sizak.
Hello.
A little bit of an introduction of what we're going to do today and who we are. Today, we're going to be going over the games that have happened in the first week of Major League Balatro. We're going to recap the game of the week, so if you haven't watched any of them, go ahead and watch this one. This is probably the best game of the whole week, at least in our opinion. As well as going over the current standings, as well as a recap of what is going to happen next week, when you can catch them, and where you can get those games. So I'll start off with a little introduction of myself. I'm Phantom. I am one of the commentators that are helping to commentate all of the games for Major League Balatro. I'm also one of the top players for Balatro Multiplayer, winner of the first Balatro Multiplayer playoffs, won a ton of tournaments, do pretty good at ranked. I also stream at Phantom Balatro on both Twitch, and I have a YouTube channel as well. So those links for that will be in the description, and now let Sizak introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Sizak. I am one of the newcomers to this season of Major League Balatro. Been streaming for a while, also stream on Twitch and YouTube. Very competitive multiplayer player, and excited to get to join Major League Balatro. Sort of at the last minute, I got to join in, and excited to be here. And yeah.
Okay, if you weren't aware, this season for Major League Balatro, the first game is actually going to be a random game. So a random stake and a random deck. And that will be decided right here, right now. So you'll be the first ones to see it. We're going to start off with the stake
Heck yeah.
first. You may notice that white stake is not here. That is because for the first week, white-red was the first game that was spun. So white-red was game one for every single match for the best of three. And so this time, we've removed white stakes, so there's no chance for it to be white stake again. It's going to be one of the other 7 stakes. Here we go.
Just don't give me black stakes. I don't like black steak. No. No way.
Well, that's how you know it's not rigged. The only one who's actually a player here didn't want it, and here we go. So black stake is what we're doing for game 1 of week 2. And here we have the decks. You can see also red deck has been removed, so it's one of the other decks that are available.
Should I curse it again? I don't want yellow or painted.
It was close to painted. It thought about it.
It was.
Black deck anaglyph will be your game 1 for week 2. Yeah, I think a lot of the Major League Balatro players, a lot of them like to skip, so I think anaglyph will be a very interesting one, especially with a little bit of higher stakes with the black stake. So interested to see how that will go. Anyway, let's get into the weekly recap. We'll start with what we consider to be the game of the week. What we're going to be going over first is Roffle versus Nemo. Specifically, the game of the week, if you can only watch one, go ahead and watch game 3. If you want, you can go to the Major League Balatro website. It's just majorleaguebalatro.com. You can go to that week 1 schedule, and you scroll down, you can see the videos for every single one of these games if you want to go watch them back. It's the easiest way that you can find them. So I will start by going over game 1 and 2. A little bit of a recap of what happened in those games, and then game 3 is where we'll get more in-depth and explain, hey, here's what happened, here's why it was the best one. So game 1 was red-white. As we said, that's the first game. It's going to be the first game for all of these matches. For game 1, Roffle was the winner. It was a pretty good econ lead, starting out early, and just kind of snowballed from there. Went up to E10 in their scores, as well as spending $200 more. Twice as many rerolls, exactly, actually. Twice the amount of rerolls over Nemo. So honestly, a very strong game by Roffle. Game 2, however, was Ghost Deck White Stake. It went down to last life each, 1 life to 1 life. And what actually happened was Roffle went for the idle play. He had an Onk, and he onked idle because of Ghost Deck. He had 2 idols, but on the very last hand, the idol missed, and so the more consistent scoring from things like the family was actually able to let Nemo win that final blind. And so that was what happened in game 1 and 2. And game 3 was the one that we want to talk to you about, especially because it was very close, very exciting, and it is interestingly on black stake and back to Ghost Deck. So Zach, what do you think about this last game?
Yeah, so this game was pretty neat. I do love a good high card build, and this is it is a very rare thing in Major League Balatro rule set because we are working with vanilla with glass and everything. If you don't know the context for that, in the ranked rule set, a rule set that Phantom and I are both used to often playing, uh, justice is banned, and the glass that you can find in packs and stuff is nerfed. So oftentimes high card builds end up being like as strong as some of the retriggering play card builds with like glass and idol and bloodstone and all those sort of things. Whereas here high card builds happen a lot less often, so it's rare that you get to see a good high card build. So in this one, there was an Eternal Mime that showed up in the shop, which a lot of players who are familiar with the Major League rule set might see that and go, okay, not worth committing to because it's not usually going to be a high card build. I myself might have gotten baited by it, but a lot of players might skip it. Nemo did take it, and Roffle did not. And at first, that was like the commentator was like, "Oh, maybe that's not a good decision, not worth it," and such. But like, it could maybe work out.
Hmm.
And then in the very next ante, Ruffle finds an Eternal Baron, and he takes it despite not having the mime. So Nemo's got the mime, Raffle's got the Baron, but they don't have the thing each other has. And the commentator's like, "Is Nemo gonna find this Baron?" Because it was about 5 rerolls down, and Nemo had a
Hmm.
little bit less money going into that ante. Nemo ends up going through, like, leaving the last shop with $30, which I get. It was 2 rerolls down, and like leaving with $30 is like, I mean, the commentators like, "Oh, I should have rolled a little bit
Completely
farther." But
reasonable
honestly,
though.
I mean, it is reasonable. I think that's maybe like a good, like, wise move, but
Hmm.
it's
You
so
never know
painful
what's going to
knowing
be in
that
the
just
shop,
two
but
rolls down.
if you had
Yeah,
known,
yeah,
you should have reroled.
yeah. Exactly,
But what if it was
exactly.
next ante?
So
You'll never know.
right, exactly. Yeah, you might need that money more for the next ante. But in the end, Ruffle ended up, I mean, having Baron, I think, when you've got red seals, the
Hmm.
Baron is more important than the mime. And then also, I think Nemo, as she was saying to Ruffle during the stream, doesn't have as much experience with how a high card build sort of works. But this is thankfully, I think, probably a learning experience for her. She said she's gonna watch the VOD back, get more understanding of it. Nemo bit more new to the game,
Hmm.
but definitely a smart player, and probably is going to get stronger and stronger as the season goes on. So that'll be cool
Yeah.
to see.
I mean, we see they took it to game 3 against Roffle, who is, the winner of the very first season. So very strong player.
Yeah,
Been playing Balatro for like ever. Very strong, both in single player and in multiplayer. And so the fact that Nemo's taken down in game 3 and make it that close for this game 3, I think very strong showing by them. One thing I would like to ask about is in Major League Balatro, it's typically easier and the safer play to go for those retriggers because justice exists. If you can retrigger even just a dusk, we're now retriggering the glass, and that's a stupid amount of points. That's a lot of points.
mhm.
But something that I think is interesting is high card, and I want to talk to you about this. Is high card more of an option on that ghost deck? Because you do have the deja vu that can just show up in the shop. You can have Ankh, and Anking one mime or one baron a lot more reasonable than Anking a whole retrigger build, because usually you have more than just one thing. So what are your thoughts about that specific on ghost deck?
I mean, I hadn't thought about that, but I can kind of see it. I don't think it makes a large difference,
Hmm.
but I can see that. And as a Ghost Deck hater, that makes me slightly reconsider because I do love my high card builds, and I'm like, if like 10% of the time, 10% more of the time, I can do a high card build, maybe.
Hmm. Yeah, because I
Yeah.
think myself personally, the Eternal Mime, if it wasn't ghost deck, I probably wouldn't take it. But I'm definitely thinking about it because you can get that Ankh,
Mhm.
and you can now I got 2 of them. The Deja Vu, you never know if a red seal is going to show up, but on Ghost Deck, you're pretty much guaranteed you're going to have that red seal. You can throw it on a king guaranteed. You don't have to like strength up a 7 or something. It's,
True.
there's just a lot of things that make that happen. Also, Cryptid could exist. If a Perkeo
Yeah.
happens, then we're going to the moon now.
I mean, yeah, true.
But even just taking Cryptid in the PvP, that's a lot more scoring. That matters a lot more for the high card build than the Cryptid would for a glass build, perhaps.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So definitely something to think about for that game. And now let's go to the rest of the games of the week. The way to work is the Onyx division is the ones that I'll be going over, and Sizak, as they're in the Bloodstone division, they're going to be going over the games for the Bloodstone division. So I'm going to start off with the Gothic Lord versus Feinberg set. As usual, red deck, white stake, very first game. This first game, interestingly enough, went to Gothic. It was a 4-0. Very quick. Something interesting is that very first ante, we were sitting in the shop. There was a reroll surplus voucher, as well as a jumbo buffoon pack. Feinberg took the reroll voucher. Gothic opened that buffoon pack, and he got a bloodstone that Feinberg never saw. It was kind of over from right then, and it kind of just snowballed since that point, because in the next ante there was a dusk. Feinberg didn't have the bloodstone. He didn't know he missed it, but he also decided not to take the dusk, which was an interesting decision. And just continued on, and kind of just snowballed from there. Feinberg also died once to a blind, because he had full econ jokers at that point. I think he had no scoring jokers, so it just died right there. And then
Agreed from Bean.
yeah. I mean, greed is definitely good, but if you die to blinds, you can easily just get 4-0'd. And that's what happened here, especially when you're down a specific scoring joker like a bloodstone or something like that. And a really cool play I kind of want to point out by Gothic. He was probably going to win anyway, but right before the final PvP, where he was up 4 lives and Feinberg was down to 1, he grabbed a showman, rerolled once, down to $9 left with like no econ besides just dusk and like luckies or something. Rerolled a singular time with a showman, and you got an extra Chad, and that was just like the nail in the coffin.
Tig.
So pretty exciting game 1, even though it was a 4-0. Very well played by Gothic. The next game was Black Stake Zodiac deck, and this one was a pretty strong win by Feinberg. Pretty close in the money earned, but just pretty well played by Feinberg. But he did get up to E17. And then the very final game was just Black Gold. It was a game of survival, and Feinberg did the surviving. So I think that's all for this first game. Feinberg did win that set 2-1, coming back after Gothic won the first game, and so they got their first win of the season. Very nice on their front. And now we'll go to the next game, which was Malf versus Dr. Spectre.
Yeah, so this was a pretty cool set. Cool to see these players. Doc, a very, very good and impressive player. Malf held his own despite it being a 3-0. The games were close. Even though the lives were, except for the last one, Doc went 4-0. As the commentator stated during this set, that doesn't really represent how close the games were at certain points. First game, Doc, one of the most interesting. The first game, Doc did something really interesting. In the first ante, I very often skip the first voucher unless it's something like an overstock or maybe a reroll voucher or like a handy. But besides those 3, I very rarely take the first voucher. Doc took a clearance sale in the first ante, which I probably wouldn't have done, but it ended up being very much worth it for him. I mean, later on, it became extremely worth it when that voucher showed up a third time, because recently in Major League Balatro, we added the voucher fix from the order where, if you see one voucher and then you see the next one in, the upgraded version of that voucher, you will see the first version of that voucher instead of you two seeing like something like completely different where they might get an overstock because you bought an earlier voucher. Or so, avoiding things like that got added in. So because that kind of voucher showed up a third time, Doc got another good voucher that Malf didn't, because he got both clearance sale and liquidation. Basically, just a little bit surprising for me as a move that I don't really make, but it worked out well for Doc, and maybe I need to reconsider. Rest of the game, Doc got pretty far ahead with the planet levels, which ended up, I think the jokers ended up being pretty similar, and that's what ended up being the win. Notably, he got a level 10 flush house, which is 500 times 50, a very nice looking number. Moving on from that one, in game 2, we're on Nebula Gold, and Doc, as one chatter put it, it was textbook ancient gold Nebula, because there was an ancient joker, and Doc just consistently kept playing those flushes, which is not often something you can do in Nebula deck in multiplayer. Is, oftentimes it ends up being high card because you're just trying to go for value. But Doc was actually able to keep it on ancient, on flush, which is important when you're dealing with ancient and gold stake, because a lot of times it's harder to make those, flush house or flush 5. And despite Doc having way less money spent overall, only $60. That's crazy. Only $60 spent throughout the game. Ended up taking it 4-0. just being consistent with the ancient on flushes. Finally, in game three was on yellow gold, and both players made an interesting agreement to spend nothing in ante one, which led to them both dying to the ante one boss.
Mm-hmm.
So that was
That's funny.
interesting. This game I feel like is maybe a runner up to the one of the runner ups to the game of the week. I it was Doc took a rental bus, and then he took an eternal sock and busket, which obviously don't work together, and obviously Doc knows this. But the eternal sock and busket just sat there for a while the bus was the survival and the way to get through for a while, until he needed to make the transition, start playing glass. So basically made a tactical bus crash, knowing that this bus is gonna build up for a while and then be gone, and then we switch over. And that was pretty neat and cool to see that move. So
Nice.
that was the set. Doc won 3-0 in that one.
Next, we have Bear versus Sizak. I'll let you talk about this one because you were
Yeah.
in it.
Yes, I will talk about this one. The pain losing my first set, but Bear's a very good player, so it wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in game one on red deck white stake, as they all have been, I started out ahead on econ and had a decent advantage there, but I took a vagabond, which I do think was probably, it felt like the right move. I don't necessarily know. It could be fine to not take the vagabond, but I took a vagabond that Bear didn't. The issue was I think I held the vagabond a little bit too long. Unfortunately, despite having the money advantage, I didn't spend in the ante when it really mattered the most to get down, because fairly deep into one ante, when Bear was making more money, he did find a Dusk, and that Dusk
Mm.
ended up being the difference to give Bear the win there. Something that I thought interesting, I was like, man, I guess I held the Vagabond too long. There was a Bloodstone in that game, and Vagabond, the streamer, who is, a great Vagabond player, I think,
Yeah.
said that one thing that I passed over was there was a golden ticket, which is an insane amount of money. I'm like, it felt like that or Vagabonds, because my other jokers were like, these are good scoring jokers. One of them was a Bloodstone. Vagabond says that he actually would have dropped the Bloodstone for the ticket. I believe he said Bloodstone is fake. And honestly, he might not be wrong. Glass is just so strong in the vanilla rule set. Bloodstone is so weaker by comparison. I was keeping the Vagabond to try to copy my Red Steel Glass, which is,
Mm-hmm.
having more of those is, I think, way more important than a Bloodstone. So I don't know. That might have been a move that could have beat both Bear and I in that game, had Vagabond or someone done that. But curious how that would have gone. And then game two, we had Nebula deck Gold Stake again,
Interesting.
right after the set with Doc. Um, but yeah, this one was one of my favorites from the week. I mean, it helps that I won this game, but I think this was a pretty neat and interesting seed. So Bear, there was a very rough decision in the first shop. There was a constellation, a clean constellation, which it's gold stakes, and so like maybe you can make it work. Maybe with it being Nebula, you can like get it on something and then get it up even more. But I felt like, and I think it was the right move. Constellation is just too slow in multiplayer, even on gold stake. So I went and skipped it and opened the pack instead. Bear went for it, and I think that gave me a huge advantage. The pack had a popcorn, which doesn't last long, but allowed me to farm a lot more value, getting out sooner and more safely farming. I believe it was a faceless, my econ joker.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some really really neat moments too later. There was this moment where because of that econ advantage, I was able to find an eternal Chad in a buffoon pack in the first ante, and Bear was not able to afford that pack and did not find that Chad. So I was up a Chad. We get to the start of, it was like ante 3 or something. I'm not exactly sure which ante it was. We get to the start of an ante, and the commentators on the commentators screens, I was like slightly behind, and the shop shows up, and there's a Chad there, and they're like, "Oh no, Sizek lost his advantage," and then immediately I open the shop, and that Chad blocks into a photograph. So worked out pretty well for me. I was up a Chad. I was about to not be up a Chad, but suddenly I was up photo Chad.
Mm.
Bear did eventually find the photo, but I was able to finish off Bear's last life with an idol hit on a perishable idol. So that was fun.
Nice.
Game three was on Ghost Gold. I picked gold. Bear went with the Ghost deck. I I had an early runner in this game, and the runner got pretty big, but Bear ended up getting ahead on deck fixing. So in this one, both my losses were due to Vagabond in some way because I didn't take the Vagabond in this game, whereas I did in game one. And the Vagabond, I believe, the perishable Vagabond, there was a blueprint in the perishable blueprint in the next shop right after.
Mm.
And I think that that was able to get Bear significantly ahead on deck fixing. Just a more nicely fixed deck was able to play flush fives consistently and stuff while I'm stuck doing straights with the runner, and that just wasn't really panning out that well. And I eventually had to end up selling it later to Onk because we both onked a Chad later on,
Mhm.
and I just was behind in that, less to work with, and Bear ended up taking that one.
Well, there's
And then,
that for
yeah, we
that
got.
game. Let's go for the next one,
Mhm.
which is Zeno versus HC Justin.
All right, so first game, our good old red deck white stake. Uh, Biggest deviation early on that really I feel like defined a lot of this game is Zaina took a certificate early on and HC Justin did not. It led to Zeno having a purple seal that he made glass. And so he had this purple seal glass card that he got to copy a lot. Sometimes with you get a purple seal glass in the deck and you can just you find the right deaths and stuff, it kind of snowballs and you get more and more of it, and Zeno had a lot of it. One really interesting decision that Zeno did make is he skipped a seltzer. This is in, I believe, Ante 3 after the first PvP. There was a seltzer that showed up in the shop, and he's got glass. That is an insane amount of scoring. But Zeno decided not to take it, and he took like a drunkard over it. It wasn't even like there wasn't room in the roster. Like, and he had a golden ticket too. So like you're missing out on value as well, not just scoring. He did only have one gold, and he had purple, so the drunkard helps get the purples. And like I don't know, it still seems kind of crazy for me, but it did end up working out. There's another thing. He did have a DNA that he was copying those glass purples with,
Mhm.
and with the seltzer, the times two might have been enough that he was getting out in one. So really really interesting bold move to skip the seltzer there, but it ended up working out. Later on, Zeno also ended up with an antimatter that HG Justin did not have, and then also ended up with three chads from a showman. So it kind of and then he had like full and star for an ancient to switch over out of hearts in the last PvP. It was kind of insane the amount of things that stacked up for Zeno. That was a pretty neat game. And then game two, we were on yellow white. This one, okay, this is another one. This was another very good game. Honestly, this set was really good. Some crazy things happening here. Zeno ended up being up an invisible Joker that HC Justin did not find. However, he ended up losing 2 lives in a row to blinds in the small and big blind back to
Mm.
back. Despite being down two lives from dying to blinds, he eventually ended up copying idol with the invis, and he ended up winning with idle hits, despite the fact he was down dusk as well. But he just got the idol online, no retriggers, but just 2 idols with some good hits. He had these poly 2 of spades that he was working with. It was the idol hit. And he ended up copying those enough times and just playing flush 5 with idol. I think in 2 PvPs back to back. And then finally in game three, we were on black deck white stake. In this one, HC Justin ended up with a second idol that Zeno didn't have. I believe he found an invisible Joker that Zeno didn't,
Mhm.
but he didn't take a photo despite having a chat in the lineup, and the idol wasn't hitting well enough to make up for that. And just you gotta respect the photo chat. Also, notably, did not take an overstock, which I think is something. Actually, both players skipped the first overstock because HC Justin didn't take it despite having enough money, but Zeno was just had no money, so that was crazy to see. Honestly, I'm surprised Zeno didn't like try to just sell whatever to guarantee the overstock, but it did come back around. HC Justin skipped it again, and it's a lot of loss to lose an overstock and not see as much in the shop there.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's that for that set.
Anyway, next match we're going to talk about is Halion versus Fur.
Yeah, so this on the red white um for early on, something that really early econ differences can really make a big difference in a game.
Mhm.
And early on here, Fur picked up a runner, which I do like runner, but on red deck white stake, it's maybe it ends up being worth it, but it's so much effort to spend, and not just the cost of the Joker itself, but the time playing straights when you could be doing other things to build it up. And unfortunately, having the buying this led to Fur having less money, and then opening up an Arcana pack with kind of a low amount of money, which had a Hermit in it,
Mm.
that Halion, I believe, had full or at least close to full $20 for that Hermit, whereas Fur had like $3 and probably didn't even take it. Led to a major early econ difference that led to Halion being up a Bloodstone. Fur did end up doing some Seance farming, which I like. Unfortunately, the Seance didn't give a lot to Fur this game. It gave 2 talismans, which were the first one was somewhat useful. The second one, I mean, we already had a talisman,
Yeah.
and then nothing else really exciting. And yeah, between having more glass and the Bloodstone, Halion ended up ahead and did end up finishing out the game with an idle skip as well. And then game 2 on Ghost Deck White Stake. Uh, Halion did find a Red Seal Glass Ace in the first blind that Fur did not find, and this is another thing that just kind of set the tone for that match. And there was a Dusk that appeared, and so there was multiple opportunities where Halion could have streamed up to a 2, left it as an ace, and was not punished because Hack did not show up. Dusk
Mm-hmm.
did. If Sock or Hack don't end up being the thing, you can have any number be your glass card, and it'll just work. And that's
Mm-hmm.
just what happened for Halion. Dusk showed up. The Red Steel Glass Aces was enough to do it, and that gave him the win. In game 3, for finally got a win here after several things going wrong for them in the previous games. Uh, Fur had a Vagabond that was just really popping off. Fur ended up being hardly behind on money at all, despite going for a Vagabond that Halion did not. And the Vagabond gave all sorts of glass and such, and ended up being the thing to take the game in that one.
Let's go on to our next match, which was Nito versus Bean. This one, kind of a bit of a domination. Not gonna lie. We see Bean. We got red white the first game. He wins E10 to like 1 million on Nito's side. So very strong showing. A 4-0 actually for this first game. The second game was Ghost White, which if you know anything about Bean, that's kind of his home turf. Interestingly enough, in this entire set, that was the only game that Bean lost a life. Was on Ghost White on his home turf. Because the very last one was black deck, black stake yellow deck, and Bean again wins with that 4-0, getting an E10. Just overall very strong showing. Bean was the winner of the last Major League Balatro, and you know it's for a good reason. Bean's a very good player, and was able to show it here with this first game in this season 3 against Nito. The next game was Edzi versus Nandre. First game was red deck white stake, and we do have Edzi winning that one. Edzi was actually able to win that one in a very strong manner. He's able to get E11 to Nandre's only 5 million. And interesting one on this one was we did see Overstock and Overstock Plus, and both players were able to pick that up very strong. But Edzi was able to get a reroll surplus that Nandre was not able to pick up. So you're able to get every reroll is now, you know, twice as effective because you see twice as many things in that shop. So we can see here, Edzi was able to get 76 rerolls to Nandre's only 24, and that, you know, that amount of rerolls, you'll see stuff that your opponent doesn't, and that leads to a very strong victory on that front. Second game, Nandre was able to pick the deck, so he picked Plasma deck. That is the Nandre special. Edzi took it to white stake, and again, a very strong econ lead for Edzi led to him winning with over twice as many rerolls. Both players, again, that overstock, so that money lead does lead to more jokers, and we have a strong E10 performance by Edzi in this game too. Game 3, Nandre took it to gold stake, and then black deck was the choice for Edzi, trying to make it go fast. This game in the end did go to Nandre. Nandre was able to keep up that scoring, keep up the pressure, and was able to take down Edzi for the game 3. So not a clean sweep on that front, even though Edzi won the first 2 games, and Edzi takes this set 2-1.
That is an insanely low high score for the game. 47,000 is the highest score that either player hit that whole game.
Yeah, was not
That's insane.
was not an easy seed with this ton of scoring, but Nandre was able to make it work more than Edzi was and took that game 3. Roffle versus Nemo, we already talked about. And then the final game we're going to talk about for this week is C-Dubs versus Vagabond. This one I was actually able to commentate myself. I hope to commentate more games in the future. You can see who's going to be commentating each game on the website if you want to check for the future. But this one, the first game, very unfortunate for Vagabond. Vagabond got a little greedy, but also bottom decked a lot. He lost 2 lives to blinds. The first PvP he should have won, based on what the scoring jokers were showed up. And he just died. He died the first PvP, and then by the time he made it to the final PvP, C-Dubs just had enough tempo that he was able to win that entire game.
Wait, so are those high scores actually accurate?
Yes, these are accurate high scores. 8,000.
Oh my gosh.
Rest in peace to the fantasy points, but legitimately, red deck white stake, highest score scored was 8,800.
That's insane.
Yeah, it was just Vagabond. He made a lot of money. He spent a lot of money, wasn't able to find enough stuff to get the scores, died to blinds, and C-Dubs takes it.
Wow.
We see the game 2 was a plasma deck white stake game. The plasma deck was chosen by C-Dubs. Vagabond took it back to white stake. We know that C-Dubs, he's done a lot of the unanimous speedruns, so he's very comfortable on that plasma deck white stake. So that might be why he brought it there. He went full chips. C-Dubs went full chips. Vagabond pivoted into that molt with that red seal glass. And that was the main difference. Vagabond actually went down 3 lives early. So it was the first 7 lives in a row were lost by Vagabond. It was almost the full clean sweep, but Vagabond was able to make that pivot just in time with the red seal glass. I think he actually built into 9s, which was barely enough for him because that's what the red seal was on. You got to build in to what the seed gives you. And he actually was willing to risk his only red seal glass to win that PvP on the one where he was down to 1 life. It didn't break. There was no breaks on the glass. For the first 2 PvPs, I think, none of his glass broke. Very fortunate for Vagabond. Once he was able to make that pivot, he had a red seal that C-Dubs didn't, and it just kind of was over from there. C-Dubs tried to fight back, getting the molt pivot, but wasn't able to do it in enough time, and Vagabond was able to take it with the comeback down to 1 life and won with those red seal glass. The final game was on gold stake yellow deck, and very close game here. The main difference was that Vagabond was able to get really, really good deck fixing. There was 4 or 5 hangmans really early, and so he was able to get a really thin deck, and then Idol showed up. I think a really crazy thing that happened for Vagabond was he was able to rip a Judgment because his Seltzer just died. That C-Dubs still had the Seltzer, so it didn't make sense for him to make space to rip the Judgment. And the Judgment was an Invisible Joker, and then the Invisible Joker hit his Idol, and then Vagabond, was able to make an Idol hit work. It wasn't the best hit, but it was close on that very last PvP, and that was the main thing that took the game for Vagabond, was that second Idol, and able to make it work with, I think it was King of Hearts was the final one for Vagabond. So honestly, very exciting game. It was kind of a sweep in the game 1, but the game 2 and game 3, absolute cinema. Would recommend watching that one if you have time. And the only other one for this week will actually be next week.
Right, yeah. So one game got postponed, and it'll be Rarran versus Scooty. Monday the 16th at 3 p.m. Eastern. All the times that end up showing up on here are going to be in Easter time. So if you're in a different time zone like me, gotta make that
do some conversions.
Adjustment in your head.
Yep. So that one is technically part of week 1's games, but we won't be able to talk about it because it hasn't happened yet. So let's continue on, and we will talk about the current standings. It is just who won and by how much, because it is the first week. So I guess I'll just speak a little bit to the Onyx division. Bean is the only one who won all of their matches. Roffle, Edzy, Feinberg, and Vagabond were able to win their matches, but it was a 2-1, and so they're all tied for second, and everyone else is below with only their 1 win or their 0 wins in the case of Nido.
Yeah, and then over here on the Bloodstone, we've got Zeno and Doc both went 3-0 and are up at 4 points. Haley and Belanos right behind with 3 points each, having 1-2-1. Have one match that hasn't even happened yet, and then all the rest of us are, including me, down below that. So.
Okay, and then we can go ahead and look at what's going to happen next week. Like we said, there's the game from the first week. It's going to be happening on Monday at 3. And then after that,
That same day, Monday the 16th, we have at 6 p.m. It'll be Zeno versus Scooty.
and then on Tuesday at 12 noon is
Yeah.
Edsy versus Feinberg on Tuesday the 17th.
Then I'll be playing Mouth at 2 p.m. the same day. A lot of games back to back this day.
Mm-hmm.
Because then right after that, we also have Belanos Bear at 4 p.m. against Fur. And then going on to Wednesday at 2 p.m. we have Rarran versus Halion.
Afterwards, we're going to have at 5 p.m. Roffle versus Vagabond. At 8 p.m. later that same day will be C-Dubs versus Nandre. And then on Thursday the 19th, we're going to have Nito versus Gothic Lord at noon.
And then we've got Dr. Spectre versus HC Justin at 5 p.m.
And then we're going to have at 7 p.m. on that same Thursday will be Bean versus Nemo. Looking at the schedule,
Yeah,
are there any games that you think are very exciting that you're like, hey, I want to tune in for that one? And maybe some strong players going against each other, or maybe some newbies that you don't know how they're going to perform.
I'm interested in the Belanos Bear versus Fur game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why that one just kind of stands out to me. I think also something that stands out to me out of this is I feel bad for Nemo. Her first two games ever in Major League Balatro, Roffle right into Bean. That's a little
Yes.
bit rough.
Those are
So
very strong players. Those are the two winners that we've had so far. And those are the first two matches.
Oh my god.
So welcome to Major League, Nemo.
Yeah.
I think the one personally I'm most excited to see is Roffle versus Vagabond, because I do know they're both very good players. Vagabond is a newcomer, but they were one of the strongest players back when Vanilla was the rule set for ranked, as well as they've been playing a ton. And Roffle, we know, very strong player, winner of the first season. So I think Roffle
Yeah,
Vagabond
Vagabond
is mine to look out for.
Yeah, I think now that you put it that way, I think I agree. He was also the winner of Minor League Balatro, beat me in the championship of that.
Yeah, so both very strong players. I'm excited to see how that one ends up going. As far as decks go, I think Vagabond's very strong on all of the stakes. Like, he can play gold stake, he can play white stake. And I think same with Roffle. So I'm excited to see where the decks and stakes go and who ends up winning that one. Like we said, the Major League Balatro, the website, that's the best way to go find this information. That's where we're getting all the information from, as laid out where you can see each game and when they're going to be put on.
Yeah, each of them are clickable, and if you
Mhm.
click on our names, it'll actually I realized you click on our name for a bit, it'll directly take you to my Twitch if you click on my name on the schedule, as well as for whoever else you click on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so definitely check that out, and that'll be enough for this first week of Major League Balatro, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, see ya.
Thanks for tuning in. Bye.